So what I want to do now is basically say basically less. And then the second thing I want to do is tell you about submittable doc types through a use case. So the use case is this. Currently, if like I have 10 employees, I have some digital assets, and an employee wants access to an asset, right? So to the SendGrid account, he is debugging some issue with SendGrid, right? So what do you think? How will he raise a request for this? That okay, I want access to this in the current state, right? In the current state of the system, the user or the employee has to drop an email that I want so and so request, and then you give him the use the share feature or the feature to give him access. But then it is not tracked in this system, right? That he raised a request and then you approved, right? Who gave him the access, so on and so forth. So now what we'll do is we will create a new doc type access request that will help us track who is raising the request and who is approving it. We'll see the approval, how to implement the approval thing. And yeah, let's see. So I'll go to the doc type list and I will create a new doc type. Let's give it the name asset access request, right? So try to give your doc types good names so you know that okay what it is actually. And then let's save it in espresso module. I want to track changes. I want to know if they change something in the request. I want to track views, who viewed this request, right? So track views will basically tell you, okay, Hussein viewed this document 5 minutes ago. So this is what track views is. One more thing I will check right now is submittable, right? So I'll tell you what it does, but for now, just remember that I checked this. And then let's build a form. So what all will we need? So first of all, let's add a link field. So I want to know which user raised this request, right? That's the first thing. So I'll make it mandatory. I will link it to the user doc type. User, right? What else will you need? Which asset do you want access to? So that will be another link field. Asset, and that will be also mandatory, and that will be a list of digital asset. So he has to tell like, okay, this is me and this is the asset I want. And then let's do one more thing. Let's do a select field. Time period. Mandatory default can be 1 day, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. So we have this internally for Frappe as well that, okay, you can access it, but for some specified duration of time. Let's break this into 2 columns. Looks fine for now. Anything else you may want to add to this? So this will be raised by the employee or whoever wants access to an asset. He has to tell me who is, then the asset, and then how long does he want the access to. Makes sense? 3 fields. Let's hit save. Okay, reason. A reason is good. So let's do a small text. Reason. So that is also mandatory. Why do you want access, right? So reason is like good, but let's add some description that why do you want access. So what you can do is you can scroll down or just search for description here. And if you write, why do you want to access this asset? And description is visible below the field, as you can see, as a note, right? So good, Aishman. Let's go to the digital access request list. Nice. So the DocType is created. Now I want to add a new asset request. Let's add maybe Nikhil. He wants to access SendGrid account to check our invoice. Maybe he's the accountant, right? Hit save. But as you can see, we'll learn a few more things on the way. That this is random name, right? Random name. We don't get any idea by looking at this name. So we can control how a document. So this is primary key, if you know that to identify this particular request uniquely, right? So this is unique name for it. So we can control it. If we come down to the naming, right? You can give a naming rule here that how do you want to name it? Either you can do auto increment, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can ask the user to set it, but in this case, doesn't make sense to ask the user to set a, what do you say, name for it. We used set by user in digital asset, if you recall. Let's use an expression. So let me just zoom in. So we can write asset request AR and then dash. When was it raised? So you can use this, and Frappe will dynamically replace this part with the current month whenever that request is created. Y, the year. You can do DD as well. So here are some documentation. And then I will do 3 hashes. So in 3 hashes means 001, 002. So 3 digits will be appended. And so the first one will be AR something something 001. The second one will be AR something something 002, so on and so forth, right? So we also allow rename. So let's not allow rename as well. So you can prevent someone from renaming. Cool. So now let's go back to the list. So the one that is named will be there. So let's delete it. Let's create a new one. So Aditya is asking SendGrid account request. Want to check usage. Hit save. Now if you see closely the name, right? AR 10 is the current month, 2023 is the current year, and 001 is the asset. So the next request you create will be named 002. So now looking at this, right? Looking just at the name, you can tell, okay, this is an asset request. In ERP Next, you might have observed this if you know. Sales invoice is SI, right? AR, asset request raised in October 2023. And this is the one. So this is quite handy. Learn about naming rules. And yeah, now the request is raised. But let me explain to you what that we checked that, right, is submittable. And that did some stuff that you can see in the UI as well. So first thing you notice is this batch draft. Second thing is submit this document to confirm. Third, there is no save button, but a submit button, right? So what is happening around here? So when we made this DocType submittable, right? Let's open up Notability. I will bring it here. Easier to explain this way. Come on, scroll down. Okay. So as of now, the normal doc types, right? They just have, like, you fill in the form, you hit save, it is saved, and you can come back, right? You can come back, edit it, and again hit save, right? You can edit as many times as you want if you have access. We learned about role permissions and everything. But, right, what we want to do is, so this makes sense for masters. So masters are data, for example, our digital asset, right? Digital asset will change. So this will change, right? The password can change, the user ID can change. So stuff can change after a certain period of time as well. After 1 year also it changes. But think about something like sales invoice, right? Something like sales invoice. So once the transaction is done, okay, I sold something, I got the money, the transaction is complete. Is there a possibility it should change unless there is an error? No, right? So in this cases, these are called transactional doc types. Transactional doc types sometimes. So sometimes transactional doc types also can change, but generally transaction completes, that is done. So transactional doc types, sales invoice, sales order, purchase invoice, right? So once that transaction is done, we want to prevent the editing of it, right? We want to prevent any editing of it because the transaction is done now. Editing one field or changing or updating the doc type doesn't make sense. So while the transaction is going on, it is fine. But once it is done, right? So this is where submittable doc types come in. So submittable doc types can be in three states. First is the draft, right? So the one which we are in right now. Draft, right? And then when you hit submit button, right? So when you hit submit, they go to the submitted state. In this state, you can't edit, update the document, right? So let's try and submit it. It's submitted, it makes a tring noise, and then this is all becomes read only. So the transaction is done, right? So now you can't go back to draft. Done transaction. You can't edit fields. So this is the second state. But what if you made an error, right? You were submitting the sales invoice. Maybe you made a $10 error here or there. You forgot to add an item and you submitted, right? Then you can't edit, but you can cancel this, cancel and amend, right? So what you can do is like you can cancel this. Okay, this transaction is no longer valid. I will hit cancel, right? So this goes into a canceled state. So after submitted, it goes to when you hit cancel, right? It goes to a canceled state. This also you can't edit by the way. Once you submit it, you can't edit, even if you go to cancel state. But now you can do one thing. See the button, you can amend it. Okay, I made a fault in this one. Scrap this. I'm going to create a new one that is going to replace this, right? So in history, this will still remain as cancelled, right? So let's amend it. Now, as you can see, it populated the same data here, and it is saying that the old one was this. This is the scrapped one. So you always have the history, right? Now you can check, you can, maybe you want to make it 1 week. Then you can save, submit. Then this is the new one. It will add a -1 in the new one. So this was the old one that you canceled. So the history remains, right? So this can be useful if you want immutability after some point, right? So sales invoices, this and that, this type of doc types are submittable doc types, any RP next. So in this case also makes sense, right? Once the request is either approved or rejected, right? It should be made submitted, done. The transaction is done. Either he got the access, he doesn't. Then there is no editing and going back, right? So this is what we call a submittable doc type. So submittable doc type have three states, again, reiterating. So they are in draft. So as long as they're in draft, you can edit, make what all changes you want. Once you submit it, now you can't edit it or update, but you can cancel and amend it. So amending is basically then you are creating a new one that is linked to the previous one. That's it. So you have the history of, okay, this was the incorrect one, this got scrapped, and this is the updated thing that we need to consider. By the way, you can, for example, if you want some field, right, to be editable even after submission, right? So what you can do is you can come to field properties, allow on submit. Make sense? If you make this to your child table, then you can edit your child table even after submission. By default, no. Does that answer your question? Luis, does this answer your question? So you just need to check this is submittable and it becomes a submittable DocType. Cool. Let's go back to access request list. And then now, okay, so it's submitted, right? Nicely handled. Cool. So what do we do now? So what I will do is, so this, whatever I created here is, right? These are the states of the DocType. So what if I told you, you can define your own states and manage this flow, n number of states. So this is where workflow builder comes in, right? So by default, a submittable DocType, right? Submittable DocType is the simplest of workflow. That okay, you have draft, you submit it, it becomes submitted, and then it goes to cancel. So these are the states. It can be in draft state, submitted state, cancel state. But think about our access request feature. Access request, right? What all states can it be in? So draft is fine. So the employee is editing it. He has not raised the request yet, right? Yeah. So then the next state is he's asking for approval, right? So maybe approval pending. This is one of the states. Yeah. So approval pending. And then from here, it can either be approved by the whoever is the password manager, or it can be rejected, right? So from draft, it can go to approval pending. And then from approval pending, either it can be approved or it can be rejected. This is the flow, right? Makes sense. Anything else? Cool. So draft goes to approval pending, either approved or rejected. Maybe we'll make rejected something that he can resubmit. Let's see. But yeah, this is what the workflow is. So in draft, we want it to be editable, right? So we have to, like, while we are figuring out the workflow, we have to make sure that whether it is editable or not. In draft state, it should be editable. Approval pending, only editable by the password manager, right? So password manager can make changes to it, but not the employee, not the employee. Here, employee should be able to edit, right? After approval, no, no one should be able to edit. No, no editing. In rejected also, this is now a business call. Whether you want to make, like, keep it for reapproval or you don't want to. For now, I will say, okay, no. Even if it is rejected, no editing, maybe raise a new request, right? For now, this is like business logic. Depends on what you are trying to build. So match this with this thing. In our case here, draft was editable, right? Submitted was non-editable. So somehow we have to have this as draft, right? In terms of editing, what do you say? Editing flow. Approval pending will also be in draft because one of them is able to edit it. And once it is approved, it becomes submitted. So that's why I'm writing it in capital letters. Submitted. Don't allow editing. Cool. Makes sense. Let's proceed to build this in Frappe. Let's go. I'll go to awesome bar as always. I'll search for workflow builder. Workflow list. Workflow list, not workflow builder, workflow list. Then I will click on add a workflow. And this was the old way of building workflows. Starting version 15, that is what I'm going to cover, Open Workflow Builder. Then it will ask you whether you want to edit an existing workflow or create a new one. We want to create a new one. So on what doc type are we applying this workflow? Access request. Let's go back. Let's type access request, asset access request. And then we give it a name, approval workflow. You can call it whatever you want. This is your choice. But yeah, let's hit create. And it shows a message that it added some field in asset access request to track the state of workflow. That's fine. And you have this empty state, right? You have some settings here, and then you have this empty slate or a board where you can basically map this. So let's drag this 4 states, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. This is exactly what you have to replicate in UI now. So this is starting V15. Earlier, you had to do some manipulations in data, not that what you see, what you get. Right now, it is that. So I'll click on here, and then I will drag a state. I'm dragging it, drop it. Now I will call it. So you can either name it here as draft or come here and you have to call it. So here are some states. So approved, pending, rejected, but we want our own state. So let's call it draft. Hit save. Now it is the draft state, right? We'll add some more states. What's the other state? Approval pending. So let's see. Either we can do pending or let's create our own state. Approval pending, right? So 2 states. Let's add 2 more. Approved and rejected. Basically, whatever I drew with my pen here, right? That is exactly what I'm doing here. But now it is actually I'm modeling a workflow. So you can click on fit. And let's move it here. Let's move it here. Let's move it here. So it looks nice. Click on fit again. This is done, right? We defined our states. We haven't defined how the data flows or anything. We defined the states. Draft, approval pending, approved, submitted. And in draft state, it should be what? Draft, right? Draft as in the sense editable. So here is where you can say doc status. So that is doc status, draft. Approval pending, also draft. Approved, it should be submitted. Rejected, it should be submitted. Now in these 2 states, no editing will be allowed. Either they have to cancel or they have to create a new request. That's it. Cool. So, okay, let's start. So what I will do is I will click here and drag. So once the cursor changes to this plus icon, right, you can drag and drop it in the next state, right? So let's expand it a bit. And as you can see, we can add it a label, what action you want. So review. So you can have as your action. So I'm telling once in draft state, if all means everyone can do it. So you can do only system managers maybe, right? Only system managers can raise this request, right? So once in draft state, any system manager can do a review action that, okay, go ahead, review. Then where will it go? It will go to approval pending state, right? And then from approval pending, I will just drag another action to here. Let's just do fit again. So it looks clean. And who I want to either approve, reject, right? So action, I will call it approve. Only allowed for. So I'm telling who is allowed to do this? Only password manager. So only password manager will be able to approve. Similarly, only password manager should be able to reject password manager. So these two fields are important. What action is he taking, right? And who is allowed to do this action? So approval can only be done by password manager. When it is on approval pending, then it will go to approved. When he is rejecting it, so only password managers can reject, it goes to rejected state. Nice. I think this is it. Let's hit save and try it. Now, so workflow updated. So you have to mark it active, right? Because, okay, let's reload. I will mark it active. So it becomes active. Workflow updated. Let's go to our request. What was the name of it? Asset access request. Let's refresh. As you can see, like the older records are fine, right? So it is approved, it is cancelled. So submitted means approved. We mark that, right? But now whenever they create a request, right? Suppose Nikhil created a asset request for DigitalOcean. Create a new droplet. Hit save. What state it is in? Draft state. Let me open up the workflow side by side so you can see what's happening. Come on. Yeah. Workflow list. Right. Workflow builder. Yeah. Let's go back. And then actions, right? This actions, whatever actions are available, here only review action is available, right? So I'm seeing the review action here. These are our own custom actions. This is not just submit and cancel now. These are our own custom actions. And now the employee can ask for review, right? Which state did it went into? Approval pending. Exactly. Now, if I go back to the access request, I can approve or reject because I have the password manager role. But if you log in as someone else, like who doesn't have access to password manager, he won't be able to approve or reject it. So now if I approve it, approved, the document is submitted. In the timeline, as you can see, administrator approved this. Let's try one more. Maybe Aditya is asking for a 1 month access to SendGrid account to check all private emails for everyone. Bad, right? Not good. So if he asks for a review, then I log in, right? As a password manager, I will reject this. Rejected. Administrator rejected it. This was workflow. Easy, very easy. You just need to map, right? In paper, and then just map it here. We have some configurations here that send email alert. So this will basically send an email alert. So for example, I asked for a review, right? Then it will send the password manager an email alert that, okay, approval is pending. Go ahead, either approve or reject. Right? This was send email alert. And for any state, right, if you click.
Hello, Hussein.
Yeah. Ben,
sorry for interruption. I'm trying to see the workflow builder in version 14. I'm not seeing it. Is it available in 14?
No.
This
so you
very
have to
one you're
manually do
showing
it
on the screen.
Yeah, this is version 15.
Oh, okay.
But if you go ahead and do this, right, go to workflow,
Okay.
This is what you will see in version 14. So behind the scene,
yes,
this UI, right, this generates this configuration. So workflow feature is not a new thing. It has been there, but you had to do this manually. So you create your own states as a child table. You give the transitions route. You do this, that. Now it's like made easy through this UI. Yeah, it was a very, what do you say, time taking process. So, and not like you can't look at it and tell. You have to somehow figure it out by reading, right? Now it's like you just look at it and you say, okay, draft, it goes to review, and then either it goes to approve or reject. Thanks to Sharik. So this was that.
Yeah, it's very nice. It's very nice.
Yeah.
In 14, it's complex. So I wish we will move to the 15.
Makes sense. So Aishman asks, Hussein, could you please demo use case for doctype status cancelled? Let's try. What do we want? Approve. So in this case, canceling doesn't make sense. But in terms of sales invoice, right, it makes sense. Something like, okay, that is no longer, what do you say, required, cancel it. Right? Kind of reversing a transaction.
And then one thing, the button to submit, can it be changed to, let's say, authorize or something of that sort instead of submit?
Yeah, you can. So write a workflow. Just mark this action, like create a new action called what do you call authorize, right? And then you can select authorize. Then that button will show authorize instead of approve or submit or something. Like in this case, it doesn't make sense, but yeah, you can. Yeah, Aishman, as a homework, maybe try a fourth state after rejection. It still remains in draft, but it goes back to draft after rejection, and they can edit and resubmit. So the workflow restarts. Makes sense. So this was workflow builder, and there are some other features. For example, right? You click on one of the states, and as you can see, there is this email template that, okay, you can write your own email template. This should be the one that is going to be sent to the approver, in this case, password manager, right? And one more thing you can do is, for example, I will take an example for this. Let's go to DocType and let's come here. Let's go to the form. Suppose I have a checkbox here. Approved, right? I will make it read only so user can't edit it. What's this? What happened? Well, let's reload. Okay. Checkbox. What is it called? Is approved. Hit save. Go to access list. Let's create a new request. And asset is this. Reason is something. Then I mark it for review. Now what I want is, as soon as this is approved, right, I want this field to become 1 automatically. That is what this setting does. Let's go back to workflow. Did we close workflow? That's fine. Let's reopen workflow. I'll come back here. Workflow builder. And on approved, right, I want to update the field. So it will ask which field I want to. Let's reload because this isn't showing the newest changes. Is approved to 1, right? Now I hit save. Now I'm telling it whenever some document or any request reaches approved, mark it, like update this field to 1. And now I go ahead. So this is more automation, right? So this can be any field and any value. I just took an example of checkbox. So let's go back to access request list. Let's approve this. And as you can see, 1 was checked. So this was workflow builder and workflows in Frappe. Done. So let's take some question. So Tony asks how to restrict the same user from approving their own request. So for example, password manager creates a request, right? Then he is able to, what do you say, approve it himself, right? Because he has the access. Maybe there are 3 password managers, so one of them should take like an approval from other password manager. So what you can do is you click on the state, right? By default it won't allow them to self approve, but you can allow it by doing allow self approval. Make sense? Does this answer your question, Tony? By default it won't allow them, but you can allow them to self approve their. Nice. Next question. Can we do second level approval and comments given by first level? Yeah, add as many states as you want. Then maybe after approval pending, it goes to approval pending from HR head, right? That is another state. Make sense? You can add as many levels as you want, right? Cool.